Welcome back. Today we are continuing our discussion on the shape tool. This is part 2. And in this video we wanted to talk about just editing individual shapes. Okay. And we edit our paths or our shapes with our direct selection tool. So whenever you're working with the path selection tool, it's going to select the entire path. But if we use the direct selection tool, the white arrow tool, that allows us to take these primitive shapes and manipulate them, because we can manipulate them just by clicking on either a line segment or an anchor point. So we have a lot of control over the shape that we're actually creating. Okay. And like the last video, or part 1 video, we talked about adding to, so we could come up here and say we want to combine shapes. So you'll see that my little cursor up there has a little plus sign next to it. So now as I draw, I'm going to add to that shape. We'll see that we didn't create a new shape layer, but we're simply just adding to our existing shape. Okay. And we're going to decide that we like that shape, so we have our layer selected. We'll come up here to edit and we'll say define custom shape. Let's call that shape 1. So we've got it defined, we have it saved, and it's saved up in our shape library. We'll see it right here. Okay. Alright, so now we want to edit this shape and kind of build upon that. So I want to start subtracting some shapes, so I'll come up here and say subtract front shape. So now as I draw, you'll see my little cursor up there has the minus sign. So now as I draw shapes, and I'll just grab an ellipse in here, I'm going to be subtracting those shapes. And we talked a little bit about this in our last movie. I just wanted to cover it again and make sure that we knew what we were doing. Alright, so we have this shape and we can add to it. I'm going to add some line segments here. And we change the weight of our line segments up here in the little control bar, so I'll just make that 30. And we'll click and drag. And you'll see over here that I forgot to hold down Shift. My bad, so no big deal. All I'm going to do is select all those shapes, and I'll come up here and say merge shapes into one layer. Alright, and I like that shape, so we'll go ahead and define it. And we'll continue working on it. So if I come over here and I wanted to option drag some of these shapes, since I already have them drawn, we'll just use some of those existing shapes. I can do that. You'll see over here that I have just one simple shape. And I'll go ahead and define that. And then once again, if I want to edit any of this, I can. So I can just come over here and I'll just start manipulating some of these anchor points. And remember, since we're using the white arrow tool, we're able to just select individual anchor points. Okay, we will go ahead and define that shape. All right. So we know that we have these functions up here that allow us to combine shapes, subtract front shapes, intersect shapes. We also have the ability to align shapes. Here we have these alignment tools. And we also have the ability to bring individual shapes forward, backwards, bring all the way to the front, or send all the way to the back. Okay. Alright, so we have all these custom shapes defined now. And we probably ought to go up here and save. So we have our custom shapes here. And if we want to save our shapes, we can come down here and hit save. And it's going to ask us where do you want to save them, and it kind of goes to this default folder, I think. And we could just call this Fun Shapes. And we also have over here in this dialog box, we can show different shape libraries. And basically these are individual shape libraries. So if we choose to show artistic textures, which comes shipped, it says do you want to replace current shapes or you want to append? So if we replace, it's automatically going to just put those shapes in our window here. If we want to load more shapes, we can say append, and it will add those shapes to what we already have. We got frames, and I'll choose to say append. Or we could just say all the shapes. We want to show all the shapes that are existing within Photoshop. I have shapes that I have purchased, so I can come down here and it will show these shapes. So here's a set of custom shapes that I purchased, and now I get to use those. Okay. So this is where you're going to kind of control what shapes get shown, and we can choose to show large thumbnails, a small list, large list. I like to see them in thumbnail size. We can replace shapes. So I could come over here and say I just want my Fun Shapes library to open, and there's my Fun Shapes. And there's the 1, 2, 3, 4 fun shapes that we created. Now this has all of our shapes in it because we saved this entire window for our fun shapes. So let's say we want to save our 4 shapes that we have into a new, or 5 shapes. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say we wanted to save just these shapes into a new library. Well, we can do that in the Preset Manager, and we can access the Preset Manager in 2 places. We can either come here and choose Preset Manager, or we can come over here to Edit, and come down to Presets and access the Preset Manager in this manner. Alright, and then inside the Preset Manager we have all these presets. This is where you're going to save your individual swatches, your gradients, custom shapes, tools, contours. Well, we are working on custom shapes, so we'll just click on custom shapes. And we're going to pull down here to our 5 shapes. And I'm just going to click, shift click, or we could even command click to select ones that are not contiguous, touching. Okay, so that is the group that I want to, and I'm going to take some of these out. This is the group that I want to save into my new library. And I'm going to call this VisCom 201 just for simplicity. So this time we'll say Save Set, and I'll call this VISC 201, and we'll hit Save, and we'll say we're done here. Now if I come over here and I want to just see my VisCom 201 custom shapes, we'll come down here and we could say Reset Shapes. What's that do? Let's see, Replace with Current Defaults. Okay, there's the Photoshop current defaults. That didn't work. We could load shapes. Let's see what load shapes does. We'll come down here to VisCom 201. Okay, so that added those shapes down to the bottom of those default ones. Or I could just say Replace Shapes and then come down here and choose my new set, and you'll see now we have just those shapes in our shape window. Okay, there's one other thing that I wanted to show you about custom shapes, and that is we can use existing images to define and create custom shapes. So I chose a simple image here with a white background, so it'd be easy to select. So I'm going to go in here and just try to whittle away with my quick selection tool. Might have been easier just to try to grab the frog on this rather than the background. So I'm just going to grab some of this stuff. Alright, that's good enough for demonstration purposes. Alright, so we have this selection. I've got the background selected, so I'm going to go Shift Command I to invert that selection so that it's just around the frog. And then I will open up my path panel. So here's my path panel. And down at the very bottom of our path panel is this little icon that says Make Work Path from Selection. So I'll click on it, and now you'll see that I have my work path up here. And we can then come over here and say Edit, Define Custom Shape. We'll call this Frog. And now we'll grab our custom shape tool. We'll come up here and grab our frog shape. And now we can draw with our frog shape. Okay? So that is how we work with custom shapes. Simple primitive shapes. We add 2 shapes, subtract, intersect, merge down. So play around with this, have fun with it, and explore all the possibilities that the shape tool and the custom shape tool have for creating spectacular imagery. Alright, one more thing that I want to show you, or just make sure that you're aware of, is that now we have these custom shapes up here. Very cool, very nice. And I just wanted to illustrate that we can use these shapes in conjunction with each other. So let's say I wanted to have this shape, and then I wanted to combine, let's say, crescent moon. So if I hold down Shift, I can add to that. And if we want to edit, we remember how we can edit these individual points. And we can transform. We can distort with our transform tool. We can warp. So you have all kinds of flexibility when you get into drawing with shapes. We can do all kinds of things. To combine to make even more complicated shapes. So there I've taken some basic shapes, I've added to it, and now come over here and I will, well, let's just add one more shape to it just for fun. Let's say we add we'll add this guy here. Oh, and it didn't get added, so how do we do that? We're going to shift click those two layers and we're going to say merge shape. And once we do, we could come up here and say edit, define custom shape. And we'll go up here and we'll see that we have a new custom shape up there. And I could combine custom shape. I'm just holding down Shift. So you can kind of see how you can get interesting backgrounds if you want to, just by combining shapes. And now I'm holding down Option to subtract from that. Okay, and I could come in here and define that shape. Turn that off. It's going to take a while. It's calculating all those paths. We'll turn that off, come up and get that new kind of background shape, and we'll just click and drag. And there we kind of have a fun, simple, creative background simply by combining, subtracting, adding custom shapes. And the cool thing is we could load this shape and come down and apply an adjustment layer. And we could create our background or our texture there, and then we could go on and on and on. We could filter this. We could blur it. And have all kinds of fun with just starting off with just simple shapes. could duplicate. And it goes on and on and on. Alright, that's all I'm going to talk about custom shapes. So once again, have fun with it and explore all the possibilities, and I will see you down the road in yet another video tutorial.